Good morning, YouTubers. April 1st. Happy April 1st, April Fool's Day. Aren't we all fools? Oh well. Today's the day I'm going to sort of wrap up my boot camp experience. You know, I keep thinking about it. There's a few highlights, very few highlights I have about boot camp that are worth talking about. And most of those are kind of negative. For example, if you're in the military and you went through boot camp, probably any one of the branches of services, except maybe the Air Force, they put you through a little fun and game thing introducing you to an OBA, oxygen breathing apparatus. And that's where you would put this mask on with this containers on, and they'd put you into an enclosed room and tear gas it. And of course, it was great. That OBA really worked. Nothing got through. Except toward the end, they all said, okay, everybody, take your mask off. That was my first experience with tear gas and the results or the effects of it. You know, you come out of that little room, you'd be hacking and you'd have snot running out of your nose and uncontrollably. Oh, it was one of the worst days of my life at boot camp was that one. And of course, other than, as I mentioned in my last video, pushing the piece to the 96 count manual of arms wasn't too good. Though I will admit, by the time I came out of boot camp 12 weeks later, I was bulked up a little bit. I guess it had done some good. And then the last thing I remember that was, to me, was insulting. Swimming. In the Navy, you have to qualify. Well, they had this Olympic-sized pool, and across the width of it, not the length, but the width of it, you would have to swim halfway across, stop in the middle, go underwater, which basically is you stand up straight. Of course, you couldn't touch the bottom at this point. And you bring your arms up from your side, up over the top of your head, which takes you down. And then when your feet touch the bottom, you would swim underwater over to the wall on the other half of the pool, touch the wall, and come up. And that was the swim test that you had to pass to get out of boot camp. Well, I did that. No problem. I could swim. And I got over it, I touched the wall, and apparently what I done though is when I punched the wall, I pushed myself back and came up. Well, the guard or whoever he is up there, the squealer, some third-class petty officer that thought he was God, saw me come up and he never saw me touch the wall, so he failed me. And that was really bitter. And I said, well, I'll just do it again. Well, you can't just do it again that day. I had to go over after hours, I think it was 3 or 4 days later, and retake the test. And if I didn't pass it then, I would have had to go to swim instructions for the rest of my time I was in boot camp. Believe me, when I did it the second time, I made sure I held my breath and touched that wall and didn't bounce back up. I came up the wall. I probably scraped my nose, I was so close. But I passed the second time. Thank God. I couldn't stand going over there every day or every other day for swim lessons. So between the marching and pushing the piece and classes, which, you know, you get tired. When they start getting you up every day between 3:30 and 4:30 in the morning, and then you hit classes, along about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's kind of hard to keep your eyes open. I think that was part of training, wasn't it, in boot camp? Make you exhausted all the time so you couldn't do anything else? And then you had the laundry. You know, you had that scrub brush and you scrubbed out your clothes. Well, we had a group of 4 of us that used to take that Navy garbage can, or as we refer to it as a shit can, and he'd fill it with water and soap and stuff, and he would wash all the clothes, and the rest of us would hang them up. And if you remember in boot camp, when you had the drying rooms, you had the little clotheslines out there, you didn't have close pins, not when I was in there. You had clothes ties, like little shoestrings, where you tied it around your article of clothing that you were hanging, and you had 6 loops on one side and 7 loops on the other side, and the two of them tied together in a square knot. And of course, if you missed, if you didn't have the 6 and 7 for 13 loops, the 13 colonies, the old company commander would come in with a razor blade and cut those things down, and you walk in the drying room, and there's your clothes on the floor, on the deck. I'm sorry, there was no such thing as a floor when I was in the Navy. It was a deck. There was no such thing as a wall. It's a bulkhead. No such thing as stairs. They were ladders. And you got reprimanded rather severely if you could remember your proper terminology. You learned there was no left and right. It was port and starboard. It was easy to remember though, because port is like wine, right? Red wine, port. So you knew where that was. The green was starboard. Green, red. Could be one of those days already. I can see it coming. Then I remembered my first ship, which is going to be the subject of my next YouTube video. My first ship was the USNS Valdez. And I went across the equator on that ship. And I remember I had the mailboy watch, which is basically you go up and you get up to what we call the pointy end of the ship, of the bow. And your job was, because we were down off the coast of Africa, we were crossing the equator. And your function was to sound the alarm when we crossed the equator. That's that line in the ocean that you can see that when the ship goes across it. Yeah, sure. Well, if you missed the equator, that means you missed the mailboy, and nobody would get their mail. All these great little things they had you doing, which will be explained in full on my next video, the USNS Valdez, the Jose. TAG 169, a flat bottom 250 foot of world. I hope you're enjoying some of these things. I'm talking about the Navy, but I thought rather than trying to go in and talk about boot camp and each day in boot camp, it would be better off if I kind of mentioned my duty stations and the pros and cons of the number of stations I had over the course of my 19 years, 6 months, and 10-day career. I hope that all of you have a great day and have a great April. Time flies when you're having fun. Enjoy it all.